Welcome back, everyone, to the Late Night Review. And this is the review show where I talk about movies that I like. Sometimes I might talk about movies that I don't really like, especially if they're part of a franchise that I like, but there's some movies within that franchise that I don't care for. I might talk about them. But this whole show is where I talk about, for the most part, movies that I like and have nostalgia for. And tonight is no exception. By the way, before I get to the movie, don't forget to like and subscribe, please, if you like this type of content. Share this video and let other people know about this channel so they can watch this type of content too and enjoy the videos. Tonight, I want to talk about one of my very favorite movies of all time. And yes, it is my very favorite James Bond movie of all time. It is The Spy Who Loved Me. I love this movie. I like this movie. And I'm just going to say up front, Roger Moore is my favorite James Bond of all time. I like him because of he always had that personality. He passed away a number of years ago, but he always had that kind of comedic personality. He always could be funny. He's a really good actor. You know, he started out doing different projects, but primarily The Saint. That was a very popular show. I watched that as a kid, reruns. They had reruns. But I grew up watching James Bond. And yes, when I was a kid, I watched videos of Sean Connery, who is awesome. I mean, a lot of people think he's the best. Some people like Daniel Craig now, the best. Pierce Brosnan, and I like them all. I have respect for all of them. I think they all did good jobs. Timothy Dalton also did a good job. Roger Moore, though, is my favorite of all time. His movies, to me, were the funnest. I think The Spy Who Loved Me was the perfect James Bond movie. It's so iconic. Had Carly Simon's great music. Nobody does it better. Great singer. She's always been a great singer and a great performer. Just, I think it's the best James Bond theme song. There's a couple others I like, but I think Carly Simon's Nobody Does It Better is the best. Although I do like Duran Duran's A View to a Kill. I like that one too, and there's others. There's a For Your Eyes Only. That was good as well. There's so many others. It's not a James Bond theme ranking tonight. So, but yeah, The Spy Who Loved Me, to me, it's a quintessential James Bond movie. Roger Moore's James Bond movies had the most action of the other James Bond, of any James Bond um, actor, in my opinion. His movies had the most action, except for a few of the newer ones that Pierce Brosnan did, maybe Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. And there's some others who match his in terms of action, but in its totality, I think, especially up to the time when he started doing James Bond, Roger Moore, that is, I think up to that time, his had the most action. Sean Connery was awesome. I watched his movies as a kid, videos of him and also Roger Moore. But I think Roger Moore's James Bond movies had the most action between him and Sean Connery. Some of the later ones probably matched Roger Moore's, but I still think The Spy Who Loved Me, there's very few Bond films that has this kind of a fast pace with these types of fun scenes. There's so many fun scenes in here. The beginning when he has the parachute goes off the mountain and his parachute opens up and it's the British flag, and then it goes into that awesome song by Carly Simon, Nobody Does It Better. The Spy Who Loved Me really has a good story too. It's kind of a end of the world type story because the main boss in here is named Stromberg, and he wants to start a war between America and Russia, have them nuke each other so he can kind of rebuild a new world primarily under the sea, exploring the sea with his technology and his underwater base. It's really a fascinating story. James Bond has to save the world, of course, as often he does in many James Bond movies. But this is a story on a scale that's so high, it's worthy of the James Bond It's more than worthy of the James Bond franchise. It's not a minor plot. It's not anything trivial at all. Not that all the other movies were, of course not. He saves the world often, but this was a big story. It was a huge plot, and I like that. And it also contains my favorite, very favorite James Bond villain, and that's Jaws, played by Richard Kiel. And he's also in one of my very favorite Twilight Zone episodes, To Serve Man, where he played one of the, actually, he played all or most of the giant aliens in there in To Serve Man. Great Twilight Zone. That's one of my very favorite Twilight Zone episodes. It's definitely in my top 5 Twilight Zones of all time. And that's just a great show. And that's a great episode. He's in here as Jaws, about 7'2". And Jaws is, perhaps not everyone's favorite James Bond villain, but I think he's fun, powerful, strong, pretty much indestructible. There's some fake parts in this movie, but it's fun. I got a ton of nostalgia for it. I also like Moonraker as well because Richard Kiel's reprising his role of Jaws in there as well. Love that movie. Roger Moore, one of the reasons I liked him the best, he also reminds me of a cousin I once had. He passed away a number of years ago. Much older than me. He's my second cousin, but he was more of my uncle's age, so I always called him Uncle. And his name was James, by the way, too. It kind of looked like Roger Moore, had the hair going back, kind of combed back, and had the jaw and the profile and everything. And so Roger Moore kind of reminds me of him. So that's another reason I always like Roger Moore the best. And his humor. To me, he was the funniest James Bond. His one-liners were the best. All of them had good one-liners. The James Bond actors, particularly Pierce Brosnan, Sean Connery. But to me, Roger Moore had the best one-liners. And his personality, he was very funny. And to me, he was the most accessible of all the James Bonds. Roger Moore was the most accessible. In other words, he was more down to earth in terms of his personality. He's playing this larger than life character. He does larger than life things. But to me, he was always the most accessible, likable, charming. And I had such a fun time with this movie. I love the score. Like the theme song by Carly Simon, did a great job. Barbara Bach is in here as she is the Russian agent. Obviously, James Bond is the British agent, as always. And the chemistry between them is really good. I think this is really, really well done. Great stunts. And one of the reasons I like this movie so much is, earlier I said it's a quintessential James Bond movie. Big plot. You have Roger Moore with his charming personality, his one-liners, larger than life characters like Jaws. You have Stromberg as your villain. A lot of people like Dr. No. He was awesome. There's a lot of other characters that you can compare with Stromberg that might even be better. But this is so good all around. You go to sites like ancient Egypt. You have the pyramids in some of the scenes. Great underwater sequences. You have the base. Stromberg's headquarters underneath the water, this underground base. And this is before the Legion of Doom. This is before Superpowers and Justice League, but it kind of looked like that. And just the way it was shaped in this movie, it looked a little bit like that, but this was made in the 70s. Superpowers, and that came out in the early 80s. I love that. I might do reviews of cartoons one day. Cartoons I have nostalgia for and grew up with. Being an 80s kid, I was born in 77. This movie was on HBO or Cinemax or Showtime. I remember when I was a kid watching this movie being repeated over and over again, and we got the video cassette. I used to rent this video all the time. It was rented for me when I was a kid, along with some of the Connery movies, and then later Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan. When he came out, we saw those two. Seen a lot. I saw Daniel Craig in Casino Royale and a couple of his other James Bond movies. But Roger Moore and Sean Connery are the ones I saw as a kid, and Timothy Dalton too. But something about, like I said earlier, I talked about how much I liked Roger Moore, and something about him stuck with me more than the others. And, he just something about him with the personality and the one-liners, the way he interacted with Jaws, how I think the chemistry between Roger Moore and Richard Kiel in their respective roles really worked in The Spy Who Loved Me and also Moonraker, two of my favorite James Bond movies of all time. And For Your Eyes Only, also, this is not a James Bond ranking, but I like The Spy Who Loved Me the best. And these stories, fast paced, they visit all kinds of exotic. I mean, they're in Egypt, they got the pyramids. There's a fight on the train between him and Jaws. It's a little fake, but it's fun. Jaws has the iron teeth, steel or iron teeth, where he bites people and kills them with the teeth. Big guy. He was perfectly cast for this. Perfect James Bond villain. It's pretty much everything I want to see. One of the reasons I like it is because it's pretty much everything I want to see in a James Bond movie, with the plot, end of the world type plot. You get the two main superpowers to nuke each other. You can rebuild a society, and Stromberg wants to do it under the water. He's obsessed with underwater research and the sea and all that. And in his headquarters, he has water tanks, aquariums with giant, sharks in there. I was going to say giant fish, but sharks, all types of exotic fishes. And when I say exotic, I'm just saying they're all kinds of a variety of aquatic creatures and fishes. There's a couple scenes there where he feeds people to the sharks, and he has, the old typical push the button, trap door opens up, someone falls down. So you got that stereotypical type of trap door in here under your feet. And there's a lot of things in here that are cliche formula, but they work. These are formulas that work, and this movie definitely works for me. And the plot is a plot that is something that I really, really think is interesting. It's not, sometimes I'll like plots that are smaller to get it more grounded and you can relate more, but this plot is interesting. Very interesting and exciting because of the consequences, what might happen if these two superpowers nuke each other. And then Stromberg wants to rebuild society. It's fascinating when you think about it. Put James Bond in the middle of it, he has to solve it. There's different scenes in here where, like, there's a nuclear bomb that potentially could go off, and James Bond has to make sure he kind of dismantles it right so it doesn't blow them all up. That's a pretty tense scene, which you can relate to that. If you've seen other James Bond movies, there's scenes in there and here that are similar. But Richard Kiel, I think, really takes this up to another level with his portrayal as Jaws, just for the entertainment value. And of course, everyone has their favorite Bond, but with Roger Moore being in here, Richard Kiel, Stromberg's a good villain. There's people who like Dr. No a lot better, people who like Blofeld better. I like the Stromberg character. I'm not saying he's my favorite. Richard Kiel playing Jaws is actually my favorite James Bond villain, but Stromberg really brings a lot to this movie. And I think everything together with the gadgets, the car, what, you push your buttons and certain things happen, weapons on the car. There's a chase scene where there's a motorcycle after Bond. He has this black tar. He pushes a button and this tar covers him, and he hits this truck that's filled with chicken or feathers or pillows. I'm not sure what it was. I kind of forgot that scene, except for the feathers kind of stick to him because James Bond hit him with that tar, and so the feathers stick to him. He falls off the cliff with his motorcycle, and Roger Moore says, "All those feathers, and he still can't fly." There's one-liners in here that are really good and that work. And then the next vehicle that chases him, there's Jaws is in that vehicle, and he's trying to shoot Bond. And the music in here is fun. It matches the scene. So yeah, to me, this is a complete package. It's pretty much the most iconic James Bond film, and it fits the franchise, I think, better than any film for all the reasons that I mentioned. So it's my favorite James Bond film. If you have never seen The Spy Who Loved Me, I think you're in for a blast. If you like James Bond movies, if you like them kind of fast paced and fun and interesting with a big plot, without, not a medium plot, not a plot that's more grounded, but a plot that's really, well, in a way it's grounded because a nuclear exchange or war is definitely possible, especially in our world today. But this movie works. It's fun. It's exciting. Roger Moore is perfect for James Bond. He's going to save the day. He always does, so that's not really a spoiler. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a very, very good movie. And please like and subscribe, share this video, and take care, everybody, and have a good night.